Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have the Library Lorekeepers Tag video that I'm going to do. I'm not the biggest tag person, I haven't done too many, however, some of my friends are participating in this tag, and I had a viewer ask for it, specifically. So I thought I would, look at this one, and I think I have some interesting topics to talk about here. This tag was created by Brian from BellTube, who has a tremendous channel. You should go on it. And my friend Caleb from Caleb Likes Books also did the tag recently, and someone on his video said, now I want Jonathan to do it. So here we are. So let's go ahead and start with, it's talking about fantasy and sci-fi and recommendations and favorite stuff, all that kind of stuff. I'm really excited to talk about this. So, and some of these were really, I had to think real hard about these. And the first question says, for the fantasy book stack, number 1 says, which fantasy world is your favorite? And I had to think about this because when I separate favorite from best. Favorite is the one that I'm most interested in, the one that I connect with the most, the one that works for me, all that kind of stuff. And if I'm being honest, the fantasy world that is my personal favorite is probably going to be the Shannara universe. It is one of the first fantasy worlds besides like Tolkien that I really got into, and also there is a simplicity yet complexity to the world that I enjoy. The simplicity is, in the Eastland you have the dwarves, and in the Westland you have the elves, and in the Southlands you have the humans, and you have up north is typically where the evil lurks, and in the kind of center is where you have the Paranor and the druids, and yes, it's kind of classic and a little bit cliche, but the world really works, and you see this world over thousands of years as different generations are happening in the different trilogies, and you're seeing how some things change and some things stay the same. And so that world just really works for me. If David Farland had been able to write more in his Rune Lords world, if he had explored more of it, that could have been my favorite, but he just didn't. And so another author would be, and series would be, the George Martin with the Game of Thrones universe, the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. That also was in contention, as was the Wheel of Time universe, but Game of Thrones and also the Wheel of Time have so much complexity that, it really makes it difficult. The only reason I understand the Game of Thrones universe as well as I do is really because of the show. Because the show helped me visualize things better. If I had just had the books, I don't know if I would have understood it as well. And same with Wheel of Time is, I appreciate the Wheel of Time. It's one of my favorite series. But when it comes to the world, it's hard to differentiate some of the cultures, some of the cities, some of the people. Some of them are super easy, like the people beyond the waste, the Aiel, and then some of the people, in like the Two Rivers are very different, and the foreigners. So like some of it is pretty obvious, and some of it's not. So that's why Shannara was the easiest for me to understand, and I really connected with it. I spent way too long on that one answer. Let's go on to my second question, which is, which magical system would you like to learn? And this one I thought was really interesting. I'm going to go with the answer of investiture from the Rune Lords saga. The Rune Lords investiture is basically where you are working with someone else, and you can take an element, a characteristic from that person and add it to your own. And like I could take charisma from someone, and my charisma gets better and their charisma gets worse, and then I could give them I could invest in them some of my strength, and so I would be really charismatic, but now I'm kind of weak, and they would be they would be stronger, but they wouldn't be as charismatic, that type of thing. You can invest in other people, and they can invest in you, and you can kind of give and take qualities. And some people take certain things that will help them politically, and some people take certain things that will help them with like romantic interests, and some people take certain investitures for wars and things like that. And it's just such a fascinating concept, and as a magic system, it's really appealing to me. I'm not a hard magic system person, but I can understand this magic system, and I really enjoy it. That being said, some of my runners-up for this answer would be the breath system from Warbreaker. I think that's really fascinating to me. And so I would have been really interested to see how that worked, to see if I could change my hair, or if I could have the power of the gods in Warbreaker. But this is the one I'll go with as investiture. All right. Question number 3 says, for my sci-fi shelves, what is your favorite science fiction technology? I'm not big into like the sci-fi tech sort of stuff. I'll read the mill sci-fi, I'll read the space exploration sci-fi, which gets really into the tech, but I don't care about the tech. I care more about the exploration, the fun, the story. Tech has never been my that's never like tech and the building of like magic systems is just not something I care about as much usually. Occasionally something will break through that I love. And so for here, I'm going to talk about the Icarus portals. In the Icarus saga, there are these portals that can transfer you across the galaxy super quick so that you don't have to travel in a spaceship for a long time. And so the main crux of the series is trying to get all these portals, and different political groups are trying to get them for their own purposes so they can control space travel and trade and stuff. And the whole portal technology, the way it works, the way it's like got this history that we don't know about, but they're trying to learn about, and also just the way that you can travel really fast. Because I would love not to have to travel. If I was in space travel, I would love to have this portal that I just get there real quick, faster than light speed. So I'd say the portals from the Icarus saga. I don't really have a runner-up because I don't think about... I've read other sci-fi with technology, but I never really thought about it that much. Question number 4 says, epic battle adventures. Which book has the most epic battle scene? This, for me, was the easiest question I could possibly answer for this, and that will be A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and specifically Brandon Sanderson. The battle scene, the last battle, is an incredible battle sequence. It is the incredibly long chapter. The chapter is like 2 or 3 times in word count what the novel, The Last Battle from Narnia is. That's just how long that chapter is. But it is an incredible battle. And I remember I read that whole battle in one sitting in the cafeteria at Liberty University, and I was amazed at what Brandon did with this battle and how epic he made it. And I'm currently reading Wind and Truth. I don't know if the final battle there is going to be as epic. It probably will be, knowing him, but it may not. But the final battle here is just incredible. And I don't think I've read anything, fantasy or sci-fi, that even remotely scratches the surface of how epic this battle is. Whatever the number 2 is, which I'd have to think about, whatever the number 2 battle is, it's a distant second for me. So I'll say The Last Battle here. All right, question number 5 is the book to adaptation catalog question. Which fantasy book deserves a movie or a TV series? And so I'm actually going to give 2 answers. One is going to be for TV series, one's going to be for movie. I think these both would translate well. So, for movie, I'm going to say the Lord of a Shattered Land novel, also known as the Chronicles of Hanovar series. This is a fantasy series. It's really sword and sorcery is what it's described as. And it is basically, the way I would pitch this is it's like Conan the Barbarian style, but it's got a lot of historical relevance with Hannibal. It's as if the historical character of Hannibal had survived the sacking of Carthage and instead had tried to go free the Carthaginians from Roman rule. And there's a bunch of fantasy creatures and fantasy battles and stuff happening in here. But what makes this so good for a TV show is it's basically like 14, each book is 14 or 15 chapters, but each chapter is essentially a short story, and it is like, if the book is a journey, our character's trying to go from this point in the land to this point. Each chapter is bringing him closer, but he's also gathering resources, making new connections, friends. He's getting people who will help him later on. He is gathering information that he's going to need. He's taking down enemies. Every chapter is its own individual short story, basically, that's like 40 pages long. But it is also a continuation of the story. And so this would translate very well to television because you have action and adventure and something new every episode that would keep people hooked. A new magic thing, a new villain, a new monster, a new plot point, a new romantic subplot between some of the characters that lasts for literally one chapter, and things like that. But you still have an overarching story that keeps you connected to the series. It would be incredibly expensive to be produced. Oh, this would be an incredibly expensive adaptation to do, but it would be worth it. Now, for movies, it's a very different answer, because I would not make Hanovar into a movie. Absolutely, totally wrong medium. Instead, for movies, and I've made this pitch many times before, I would absolutely adapt The Magic Kingdom of Landover. This has a kid's sense of whimsy and wonder and fun, Narnia-like, getting whisked off into another fantasy realm. It's kind of got that type of story to it, but it's much more adult friendly. I mean, Narnia is, of course, adult friendly, but this is, I think that it would be more popular with teenagers and adults. This is Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold is the first book in the Landover series, and that is a book about Ben Holiday, who basically buys a kingdom for $1 million and then realizes the reason the whole kingdom costs so little is because it's in shambles, and he gets whisked away to try to fix it while also dealing with all this crazy stuff that's happening, and there's dragons and there's magic and fairies and all this stuff and romance, and I think that this would translate so well onto the movie screen. I mean, I just think everybody would like this. All different types of fandoms could easily like this. There are ways to get, with the ideas of getting people who like classic tropes would love this. People who like more modern tropes, I think, would also like this. I think that this is a unifying type story that you could get everybody from all four quadrants of, young, old, male, female, everyone would love this. So that's why this would be a great movie adaptation. And please, someone make this into a movie. All right. Question number 6 is from the Villains Vault. It says, who is your favorite fantasy villain? And I am going to pick 2 again this time, because I get 2. It's my video. So I am going to choose, my first villain is not just my favorite villain in fantasy, but he's also just one of my favorite villains in television, because they adapted this show and it works so well, and also he's such a great guy, and that is Tywin Lannister from the Game of Thrones series. Specifically, I think he's at his most epic in A Storm of Swords. Now, I know why other people don't love him as much. I just find his dialogue, I find his ideas so Machiavellian. He is such a brilliant tactician, while at the same time having this huge, huge blind spot with his children that he just doesn't understand, and so that ends up being his undoing. And I thought that he is a phenomenal villain, and it is the reason why the first 3 books in the Game of Thrones series are just one of the reasons it's so amazing, is because of his influence in them. And in the TV show, Charles Dance, amazing job from Charles Dance in the TV show. He was brilliant. His scene where he is describing what makes a good king to Tommen in season 4 is one of my favorite moments in television. Not the Jaime Cersei stuff that happens after that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Tywin's discussion with Tommen is brilliant stuff. Love it. But that's not my only one, because that's like the obvious answer for me. So my other favorite, and I'm going to again go back to one of my favorite series with this, is Raj Aten from the Rune Lords saga. The first time you meet him in this book, he is terrifying. The way that David Farland described Raj Aten and the amount of investiture he had, the amount of people that he had, whose lives he had destroyed so that he could gain all this power, was just horrifying. And the fact of the element of hopelessness you have against him. And then the arc that he takes the villain on, where the villain thinks he's the hot stuff, and then when all the fantasy stuff happens in this book and he realizes, shoot, I'm not all that, he just goes on a very interesting arc. And I really like the character of Raj Aten, and so that's my second favorite fantasy villain. All right, well, let's go to the Villains Vault. Number 2 is, what's the most terrifying science fiction antagonist? So this one was also actually a pretty easy answer, because I love the villain in the series, the saga of the Seven Sons. His name is Chairman Wenceslas. And you realize pretty early on, he's a kind of skeevy dude, and by the book one, you realize, towards midpoint, end of book one, you realize, he's the villain of the series. And he is a despicable yet brilliant guy. He is a force of nature. He is the type of guy that he could totally win elections. He can totally win over people. He is able to put on airs that will make people love him, and yet also he is so brutal that he will make everybody fear him and hate him at the same time. And he's just such an interesting villain. He's kind of one note at times, but Kevin Anderson writes that one note so well, and that's why I love his character so much in this. So he's my favorite science fiction villain. All right, my next question number 8, comes from the world building wing. It says, which book has the most immersive world building? Now, this is not necessarily favorites, and this is not necessarily talking about magic system. This is just talking about world building in general. And so when I thought about that, I thought about the major fantasy series that I've read, the ones that I've loved. An argument could be made for the whole D&D universe, the whole Forgotten Realms, because it's huge. There's so many books, so many lands, so many peoples in that. An argument could be made for that. But for the ones I've read, I'm going to go with, because I've read about 6 of those from the Driss books, and I didn't love the world building there. But if I'm going to go with which book has the most immersive world building that I think worked, and that's got to be the Game of Thrones universe, the Song of Ice and Fire universe. You know, the Seven Kingdoms. Is so well designed. You know, the North is so contrasted with the South. I think that the world building of having kind of the distant lands with the Essos, I think, is kind of interesting. I think that Essos is way too underdeveloped. And that's why I also really like the world. And also, the world's so grim, which is why I also, for one of the other questions, picked Shannara instead, because I don't like my world being grim as much. But it's just so detailed. And when a character says, "Oh, I'm from the Reach," I can feel what the Reach is like. And the character says, "I'm from the North. I'm from Winterfell." You have that feeling to it. And George Martin, you can understand the values of the characters that he writes from the different lands that they're from, and also the different families that they're part of. So that's why this one takes the cake on world building. Now, let's go to question number 9 with character classification. It says, who is the best chaotic neutral character? And I actually had a debate with some friends of mine about this, on where to put this character on the spectrum. Because to me, I actually think that this character kind of works well. This character, you could make the argument that this character is chaotic good. You could also, at times, make the argument that this character is kind of chaotic neutral or chaotic evil, which is why I think the chaotic neutral kind of fits him at times, and that is Hoyd from the Stormlight Archive series, or also known as Wit in these books. He's kind of all over the place. He is, at one moment giving the best advice to our characters, and at the other moment completely insulting them and just making them feel down in the dumps. And he has that kind of heart of gold, but also is willing to make fun of you completely. And he's kind of, to me, he kind of has that chaotic neutral nature. And so far, what I've read in in Wind and Truth, he's keeping that nature. All right, question number 10 says, underrated gems. What is the most underrated science fiction or fantasy book series? I am going to go with the Symphony of Ages. I don't see people talking about it on BookTube. I don't see people talking about it in review sites as much that I follow, or Twitter or anything. I love this series. I'm continuing it. I read the first 3 books in 2022 and 2023, and I'm reading the next 3 books in 2025, and I love these books. I love Elizabeth Hayden's writing style and her themes and her characters and her world building, and I just think she's just got that kind of blend of fantasy I love, and I'm really excited to read the next trilogy in the series, and I wish more people would talk about it, and other reviewers just don't. I think it's because it's probably not gotten reprinted, and they're just not buying the books in bookstores. I love these covers, but I understand maybe that's not what the best to sell them now. if these books you could pitch as romantasy, I would, in fact, if I were Tor, I would reprint all these books, give them the type of romantasy cover, and it would kind of bring people into the Wheel of Time world building, but with, the romantasy kind of subplots that happen in this book, and I think that would ease people in. Oh, that'd be such an interesting thing to do. Anyway, that's the underrated that nobody talks about. Reading challenges is the next question. It says, what was the most challenging fantasy book you've read? And challenging. Like not just saying a fantasy book I didn't like, because that book, in my mind, the fantasy books I've hated the most are pretty easy to say, but also they weren't hard to read. I don't feel like it was difficult to read. But if you're talking about the most difficult to read for me, has to be the Malazan books. In fact, I'm going to say because I read the first two Malazan books. They were both equally difficult to read. I didn't really understand what was happening. I never connected with any of the characters, really. They just jumped from world to world, so you just, I was like, all right, well, not world for world, but like land to land, and I was like, you know what? I was starting to maybe understand stuff, and nope, you whisked me away to somewhere else. I still don't understand what's happening now. And I finished 2 books, and if you asked me to give like a detailed plot or a character breakdown right now, I probably couldn't. And I read the whole of both books. So, yeah, I did not care for either of these, and they were really hard to read. There are books I actually hate more. I don't use the word hate much. There are books I dislike more in the fantasy genre, but these two, these were tough. And the last question is a library recommendation. Recommend a fantasy book for beginners. And so I thought, if you're trying to get into fantasy and you've never really read fantasy before, what are my recommendations? Well, I'm gonna list a couple. So first, the easiest one to get into that still kind of introduces you to the idea of fantasy world building and magic systems and things like that is Harry Potter. But it's so well read, most people have read it by now. So, it's not necessarily the best recommendation if you're like, all right, yes, I read that. I classify that as middle grade or YA. I'm talking about adult epic fantasy. All right, if you've read Harry Potter, which is like a good starting point, then I have to think, what's another good starting point? I know some people are going to say Tolkien. Tolkien has some difficult language to get through, not like foul language, but just like the way he writes his prose is very different. And if you just throw that as the first fantasy book for someone, it may be more difficult for them. But if you recommend a book that has the same plot as Lord of the Rings, but is a little bit easier to read, I think that's good for beginners. Now, I think that the Wheel of Time is objectively, not Wheel of Time, sorry. I think that the Lord of the Rings is an objectively better series than this, and I'm going to recommend Shannara. I think that Lord of the Rings is an objectively better series. However, in terms of getting people to read, to start reading and enjoy it, I think that this is an easier entry point. Then again, one of my best friends, Caleb from Caleb Likes Books, he didn't really like The Sword of Shannara when he started it, although he had already read some epic fantasy before, so it wasn't necessarily a starting point for him. So, but if this is your first fantasy novel, maybe you'll really get into it and love it. So there's nuances and different places you could start. An argument could be made for if you like kind of dark stories, a Game of Thrones could be easy to jump into because the first book doesn't have too many characters, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. An argument could be made for Wheel of Time, but I'm gonna say Harry Potter and Sword of Shannara. So that is the library Lorekeepers tag. If you are interested in me doing other tags, let me know what videos I should look up, which booktubers I should, and which tags I should look up to do next. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.